One thing that has become abundantly clear is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to this implementation. As I mentioned, each health system is going to find itself in a unique situation that's going to define the path that they're going to need to take to engage in and ultimately get to the end game with RevElate as a fully installed application. And our goal is to share what we know based on our experience with both Millennium and Saurian, implementing both of those at many customer sites, as well as what we're learning as we do our own investigation to help prepare the community for what's to come. So I thought today I would start with what I think is a pretty fundamental consideration as it relates to any type of system implementation, but it's particularly important here with the transition to RevElate, and that's language. It shouldn't be any surprise that the two applications, even though they manage the same kind of information from a patient accounting perspective, they don't always use the same terminology to describe that same information. If you think about it from the perspective of if you're the one in the situation who's beginning to get engaged with the new implementation and trying to understand new concepts and what's different between what I'm using today versus what I'm about to be using in the near future, but I'm trying to figure out the words I'm hearing from my Cerner solution consultant and translate them in my own head, I'm not spending as much time understanding and absorbing the new concepts that they're trying to introduce to me. So taking that opportunity to address those differences early and educate your team members on what those terminology differences are, I think is a critical step in gaining a leg up on what has to happen in that implementation. And additionally, that confusion that can be created with that lack of understanding or that disparity between terminology, it's just an opportunity to make bad decisions, which result in bad design, rework that has to be done, retesting that has to be done. So it's really, really important, I think, to take that time and make sure that you level that playing field and make sure that your team members understand and can kind of connect the dots between what they're familiar with today compared to the new terminology that they're going to be looking at in the future. And I think too, from anytime you have a point of integration, you've got the opportunity or potential point of failure that needs to be managed. And there's some fundamental differences between how the two applications actually manage errors. It's an attempt to be much, much more proactive with management of issues. And it's an approach that allows you to identify and respond to data problems far earlier in the process, with the expectation that fixing the problem sooner reduces the opportunity for that problem to become a bigger problem as time passes, and a problem that's ultimately harder to fix. The other piece that's a little bit different with this approach is it gives the opportunity to be much more focused on root cause analysis and correction. Two things with that. One, if I'm the individual that's responsible for correcting the error that I caused, I'm going to be incented to do it right the first time. Correcting those errors interrupts my productivity, it slows me down, and it's also going to incent me to want to make sure that A, I'm following the correct workflow, and B, if there's a problem either with the workflow or with design that's been implemented that's allowing an error to happen, I'm going to be much more interested in getting that corrected so that we can prevent that issue from happening in the beginning. So all the upstream activities, ultimately, the idea is should be producing the necessary data appropriately to support correct and efficient back-end processing for patient accounting and allow you to get the bill out the door. We'll say too, there's a little bit of a larger concept here, not even just about error management, but about how to approach your system design as a whole. Obviously, the clinical delivery of that service line is critically important, but it's equally important to understand and develop the workflows around the scheduling and registration and ultimately billing in concert with what's happening with the clinical delivery so that the entire process is cohesive and delivers what's needed from a billing perspective to prevent delays in getting your claims paid and getting dollars in the door. From an operational perspective, what does that mean to the way I do business today as compared to how I need to do it in the future? Anytime there's a shift in workflows like this, there's going to be disruption, and it's going to take some time to figure out what the appropriate workflows need to be, who actually needs to be involved in managing this, and it may even result in some fundamental changes. New roles maybe need to be created, maybe shifting responsibilities of building teams that are able to assess and manage these errors and issues, and ultimately have that skill set to be able to look for, identify root cause, and then influence the design change or workflow changes to correct them and prevent them from happening in the future. Could impact staffing budgets, could transition where some staff needs to live, but ultimately a real intentional approach needs to be taken to identify and manage how all of these types of issues will work and ultimately get prevented. Ideally, the longer that you're using the application, if you're doing this well and you're managing the root cause analysis and correcting the root cause, over time you should actually see your errors diminish because you're taking advantage of that opportunity to correct them and prevent them from happening in the first place.